Hello and welcome to today's episode. QA is often blamed when tests fail, but nobody ever questions the environment. Today we are going to fix that by building one that QA can finally trust. Let's go! In episode 2 we were able to create environments dynamically, which sounds great of course, but we mix everything together. Infrastructure, installation, configuration. There was no real separation of responsibility. So yes, it worked, but when something failed, it became very hard to see what the actual problem was. From a QA perspective, that's like writing tests without page objects. They run, but it's not really a maintainable way to do it. Then in episode 3, we actually fixed that mistake. Terraform created the infrastructure for our dynamic test environment, but it was just a clean machine with a network and an IP. There was no real installation and no configuration on that infrastructure just yet. And so at that point, it's basically an empty foundation. And from a QA point of view, that's like having page objects, but no tests yet. In episode 4, we are gonna finally fill that gap. Ansible will prepare the environment that Terraform created. All the tools will be installed and the setup will be verified. And this is what gives us finally a clear separation. Terraform builds the infrastructure and Ansible just furnishes it. Keep in mind, after Ansible has furnished the house, nothing is running yet, so no application and no tests. From a QA point of view, this can be compared to setting up clean test data for your test. And because this setup is automated, we get the same clean environment every time. So you might wonder, why not just do everything in Terraform, right? Terraform can install tools, it can run scripts and even start applications. We showed that in episode 2, right? The issue isn't what Terraform can run, the issue is that Terraform can't verify readiness from a QA perspective. Terraform can install tools and even start them, but it doesn't tell us whether they are actually running and usable. When infrastructure and setup are mixed, it's no longer clear who exactly owns what. And failures become much harder to interpret. And for QA, that's a big problem, because before we even start testing, we already don't know whether the environment itself is reliable. A better way to stay in control is to split responsibilities and use Terraform and Ansible, but let them work complementary to each other. Terraform just builds the environment and Ansible just prepares it for testing. Now when something fails, we know exactly where it failed. Infrastructure issues are now clearly separated from setup issues with clearly defined boundaries. Now that we have explained why splitting responsibility matters, let's dive into the hands-on part. And just like in episode 3, we'll start by installing the tool we're going to use today. In the last episode, we already installed Terraform that was about building the environment. And today we're going to prepare it. And for that, we're going to use Ansible. I'll run brew install Ansible. And once that's done, I'll quickly verify the installation by running Ansible or Ansible -- version. As shown in episode 3, before we can actually furnish the house with Ansible, we first need to build that foundation with Terraform. Terraform creates the environment in AWS, one machine, one network and one public IP. That public IP is part of the Terraform output. This is how Ansible knows where to run. Nothing changes here, we are continuing from the same environment. In the AWS console, we can now see that same environment. The instance name is the same name we defined in the main.tf. The public IP here matches exactly the IP Terraform just outputted. Before we look at the files, it helps to understand the split in Ansible itself. The inventory.ini answers one question: where should Ansible connect to? The playbook describes how we prepare that environment, installing tools, verifying them and making sure it's actually ready to use. So the inventory points Ansible to the environment Terraform just created, and the playbook describes how that environment should be prepared for testing. So, like I just explained, we are going to replace the IP in the Ansible.ini with the Terraform output. That way Ansible can build directly on the environment Terraform just created. As you see, Ansible now has the Terraform IP. What you see now is the playbook, and as mentioned earlier, this is where Ansible executes the actual tasks to prepare our test environment. I'm stopping here at Docker because this is very critical for QA. QA needs Docker to run the application in a very controlled and reproducible way. Without Docker, we can't even start the application, let alone test it. And what's important here, guys, is that the playbook doesn't just install Docker, it also verifies that Docker is actually running and usable. That verification is what tells us that the environment is ready to be used for testing. And that's the key difference compared to what we saw earlier with Terraform alone. This part here is important. The application files are copied onto the newly created test environment. It copies the files into a folder called app. This hello world is important. It's the first proof that the environment is correctly prepared and usable. It's not the application we plan to run yet, but it tells us the environment is up and running correctly. Now we're going to finally run the Ansible Playbook command. This ties everything together. The inventory file tells Ansible which IP to connect to, and the Playbook tells it which task to run on that environment. So Ansible knows where to connect to and what to do, just like I mentioned earlier. Once we run the command, you can see Ansible is now installing the tools and executing the tasks. And this part here is important. This is the verification step. This is where Ansible checks that what we've installed previously is actually running and usable. And as you can see, the assertion passed, Docker is running. To keep this practical, let me quickly show you that the files we copied earlier are now on the newly created test environment. And that Docker is also running as expected. Let me just show you by SSHing into the machine. As you see, the files we copied from the app folder from our local repository are now visible on the machine as well. When I use cat docker compose, you can see it's the same file we also have locally. Let me quickly show you on screen that Ansible did its job by running a Docker hello world. This confirms that Docker is not just installed, but actually running and usable. If Docker wasn't ready, this step would fail. At this point, the environment isn't just created, it's prepared, verified, and ready to be trusted. And in the next episode, instead of running a hello world, we'll run our own application stack and tests on infrastructure we control and an environment we prepared ourselves. And to make that possible, we first need a solid foundation. It all starts with Terraform, guys. Terraform creates the infrastructure. One machine, one network, one environment. Clean, reproducible, and predictable. And then the star of today's show, Ansible, takes over. This is where the environment is prepared for QA. The tools needed to run the application are installed and verified on the machine. We don't assume readiness, we are proving it. At this point, the application and the tests are not running yet, and that's intentional, guys. In the next episode, we'll deploy the full application stack and build upon what we've prepared today. So why can QA now trust the environment? It's fresh, newly created, verified, and asserted. That is why QA can now trust the environment before testing even starts. What you're seeing here is one fully prepared, test-ready environment. It's that with this setup, we can create the same environment again and again. Same infrastructure, same preparation, and same verification. That means the same level of trust every single time. No matter how often we want to recreate it or how many environments we need. Reproducible by design and not by luck. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching, guys, and next time we'll build on this foundation by running the full application stack.